All right, am I on? Mm-hmm. Hey, all right. I didn't even turn it on. It was already on. Okay, welcome. All right, namaste. Okay, this is our last NUSA public broadcast. Hey, Anna.
Hey, you're still asleep. We're all here.
So I'm going to read some things from Shri Aurobindo again tonight, where he speaks more of the uniqueness of his yoga and the supramental force. But I did want to talk about the three relationships with divine. The first is for divine. You live for divine. This is the karma yoga, where all that you do is an offering, that everything is an action that's a offering up or a sacrificing for that which is greater, rather than some particular outcome or getting something in it for you. So that's the fulfillment of the karma yoga path. And the second is live with divine. So living with divine is constant contemplation, where divine is a presence, a felt force, a sense of relationship with that principle, that greater than us principle, which is also us, of course, but it is a moving into a deeper relationship. So if you can't live with divine, you can at least live for divine. And part of that is a reflection of how you commit yourself. How do you organize your life? If you give your life over for divine, then sooner than later, you'll be living with divine. So it's really a matter of how we organize ourselves and our lives in either of these, and soon third case. And the fulfillment of that is living as divine, where there is no separation between you and that greater principle that you are. So it's for divine, with divine, and as divine. So this is a thread throughout all of Shri Aurobindo's teachings. And he recognized from the very beginning, he shared actually when he first came to India. Maybe I'll read a little bit of his experience when he first came to India. In this way, it was unique for him. Because though he was born in India, and he's of Indian ancestry, he was sent off very young to England and was educated, got his degree there, and then came back. And the day he came back and he touched Indian soil, he shares his experience. My own life and my yoga has always been, since my coming to India, both this worldly and otherworldly, without any exclusiveness on either side. all human interests are, I suppose, this worldly, and most of them have entered into my mental field and some, like politics, into my life. But at the same time, since I set foot on the Indian soil, on the Apollo bunker in Bombay, I began to have spiritual experiences. But these were not divorced from this world, but had an inner and infinite bearing on it, such as a feeling of the infinite pervading material space, and the immanent, capitalized, the immanent, inhabiting material objects and bodies. At the same time, I found myself entering superphysical worlds and planes with influences and effect from them upon the material plane, so I could make no sharp divorce or irreconcilable opposition between what I called the two ends of existence and all that lies between them, matter and spirit. For me, all is Brahman, and I find the divine everywhere. Everyone has the right to throw away this worldliness and choose otherworldliness only. And if he or she finds peace by that choice, he or she is greatly blessed. I personally have not found it necessary to do this in order to have peace. In my yoga, also, I have found myself moved to include both worlds in my purview, the spiritual and the material, and to try to establish the divine consciousness and the divine power in men's hearts and earthly life, not for a personal salvation, but only for a life divine here. This was exactly my experience. There was never a battle between I won't say never. There was a period of time that all I wanted was what was coming. But there was this innate design to make it real, to bring it into life, to apply it. And I think this is the uniqueness of what we're talking about here, because this has something to do with the incarnation force, the nature of the incarnation force, and who it selects to bring to be a channel or instrument. Now this part I haven't found before, and I thought it was so fascinating. And this has to do with the incarnating person. The personalization of the incarnation as the ultimate purpose of the supramental force. To become a person, to become personalized. The incarnation person first overshadows as an influence, then enters into the centers, one after the other, sometimes in the same form, sometimes in different forms, then takes up all the nature and its actions. The descent of the supramental, the incarnation force, can hasten things, but it's not going to act as a patent medicine or change everything in a twinkle of an eye. One thing must be said, that an incarnation is not the object of this yoga. It is only a condition or means towards the object. The one and only aim we have before us is to bring down this new consciousness, this supramental consciousness, and the supramental truth into the world. The truth and nothing but the truth is our aim. And if we cannot embody this truth, 100 incarnations do not matter. Not only the whole mental, vital, and physical nature of the ignorant human being has to be overcome and transformed, but also the three states of mental consciousness which interfere intervene between the human and the supramental, and like all mind, are capable of emitting great and capital error. Till then, there may be descents of the supramental influence, light, power, ananda, but the supramental truth cannot be possessed, organized, put in the possession of a whole nature. One must not think before that one can possess the supermind, for that is a delusion which would prevent further fulfillment. So what's it saying? It's saying that this principle we've been pointing to, the Incarnation force, which is in the Gita represented by Krishna, is looking to become you. To become the person, to be personalized, to be embodied by you. Now, I just think, I've not read this before. And this whole idea is the incarnation is not the goal. It's a whole different paradigm. The incarnation is what is seeking to become us, to become you, to whatever capacity we have. And it doesn't care if it's full in one person and halfway in another and a partial in a third. It is seeking to come into the collective consciousness by any means possible. And then he starts speaking of transformation. What I mean by spiritual transformation is something dynamic, not merely liberating of the self or realization of the one, which can be well attained without any descent. It is putting on the spiritual consciousness, dynamic as well as static, in every part of the being down to the subconscious, inconscient. That cannot be done by the influence of the self, leaving the consciousness fundamentally as it is, with only purification or enlightenment of the mind and heart, and the quiescence of the vital. It means bringing down of the divine consciousness itself, both static and dynamic, and to all these parts, and the entire replacement of the present consciousness by that. Now, I think that's just totally cool. So it is, he shares about how traditional yoga is lifting the consciousness associated with the body up into the vital, lifting the consciousness associated with the vital up into the mind, lifting the consciousness of the mind up above into the psychic, and from there into the cosmic, as the traditional yoga, lifting and leaving all those behind. Leave the body behind, leave the vital behind, leave the mind behind, and all the egoing that goes on with those structures. But that's not this yoga. That's not our shared purpose. It's not just to the transcendence, although it is very important to be able to expand into that outside of the domain of what has shaped you as a human being, breaking out of the box of those programmings and conditionings. This we find unveiled and unmixed above the mind, life, and body. It is a matter of the undeniable experience of many that this can descend, and it is my experience that nothing short of its full descent can thoroughly remove the veil and mixture and effects of the full spiritual transformation. So this is the Mother Book. He's not saying anything new. He's saying it differently. It's the person himself sharing his own experience. And it just richens and deepens the fullness of what he brings and what we're doing. And it makes, for me, it's a confirmation of what's happened to me, a confirmation of what I'm experiencing, a confirmation of what I'm seeing happening to all of you. And that it has not been able to fit into a paradigm of traditional spirituality. It is this just really gets clear for me of the uniqueness of this path, which is really about the undoing of the old self and allowing the divine to take over. So to live as divine, not just for divine or with divine, is the goal of this yoga. The mother not only governs, I'm reading from the 6th chapter of the Mother Book. The mother not only governs all from above, but she descends into this lesser triple universe. And personally, all things here, even the movements of ignorance, are herself in veiled power. It's really the divine manifesting, the divine incarnation, be it Shakti or Shiva, manifesting itself as us. And her creations in diminished substance, her nature body and nature force, and they exist because, moved by the mysterious fiat of the Supreme, to work out something that was there in the possibilities of the infinite, she has consented to the great sacrifice and has put on, like a mask, the soul and forms of the ignorance. But personally, she too has descended, stooped to descend here into the darkness, that she may lead it to the light, into the falsehood and error, that she may convert it into the truth, into this death, that may she turn it into a godlike life, into this world pain and its opposite sorrow and suffering, that she may end it in the transforming ecstasy of her sublime Ananda. So if that doesn't change your life, nothing will change your life. So it's a great undertaking. And the greatest enemy to that is, of course, our ego, our vital ego, our egoing. We all have a vital ego, but it's the egoing, it's the egoism that lives in the vital, the egoism that's vested in the body, the egoism that uses the mind to validate itself, support itself, justify itself, enhance itself. This is the battlefield. It is the darkest nights that prepare the greatest dawns. And it is so because it is into the deepest inconscience of material life that we have to bring not an intermediate glimmer, but the full play of the divine light. But what is most important for us is that it manifests as a transcending light, knowledge, power, purity, peace, Ananda, of which we become aware and which descends into the being and progressively replaces the ordinary consciousness itself by its own movements. That is the second transformation. One more thing, the more intense the experiences that come, the higher the forces that descend, the greater become the possibility of deviation and error. For the very intensity and the very heights of the force excites and aggravates the movements of the lower nature and raises up in it all opposing elements in their full force, but often in the disguise of a truth, wearing a mask of plausible justification. So inevitably, when the incarnation seeks to manifest, it needs to inhabit all of us, as us. And how do we do we work for divine, with divine, and in the process, be as divine. And it's the battle, because even after you've met your own darkness and your own structures, then you're simply ready to meet those structures in others and in the collective consciousness. It's all meant for the incarnation to do its work during times of transition. So it's not like another yoga. Whole different principle behind it. All right, this is some quotes related to this that I thought when I read it, I think it's something to know, because we keep ending up being defeated by ourselves. We keep getting overtaken by structures that we make ours or believe are ours that prevent us from allowing this magnificent incarnation to inhabit us. I believe he's, in this case, speaking to a person who's written to him, so it's his letters, so he's responding. I believe you are quite capable of attaining this and realizing the divine, and I've never been able to share your constantly reoccurring doubts about your capacity and their persistent reoccurrence. It is not a valid ground for believing that they can never be overcome. This relevant to you, just listen, because you know it's not just any one of you. Such a persistent reoccurrence has been a feature in the sadhana of many who have finally emerged and reached the goal. The endless repetition of it can't happen, it's not me, it's never going to happen. That is one of the stages of this journey. And it goes on and on and on until you can begin to get some authority, until you come to it enough that you can stand in more of what you're becoming than who you've been. In the nature of these reoccurrences, there is usually a constant return of the same adverse experience, the same adverse resistance, thoughts destructive of all belief and faith and confidence in the future of the sadhana, frustrating doubts of what one has known as the truth, urgings to abandonment of the course that the course taken by the attacks is not indeed the same for all, but still they all have the same strong family resemblance. For some it's stronger, for some it's quieter. Those who are here where there's a real possibility, it will be stronger. It'll be more persistent. You'll doubt yourself. You'll doubt your path. You'll doubt it's working. It's just the nature of the kicking and screaming, and I don't want to change. It should be easier. It shouldn't be like this. It's the condition that we forget is finally being met when something greater than you comes into you. One can eventually overcome if one begins to realize the nature and source of these assaults and acquires the faculty of observing them, bearing without being involved, endure calmly, or absorbed in their gulf, finally becoming the witness of their phenomena and understanding them and refusing the mind's sanction, even when the vital is still tossed in the whirl, and the most outward physical mind still reflects the adverse suggestions, so that we become this dual consciousness, one part willing, one part resisting, going on concurrently. We start creating this place of standing in the midst of what otherwise we would lose our access to our own authority. In the end, these attacks lose their power and fall away from the nature. The reoccurrence becomes feeble or has no power to last. Even if the detachment is strong enough, they can be cut out very soon or at once. The strongest attitude to take is to regard these things as what they really are. Incursions of dark forces from outside, taking advantage of certain openings in the physical mind and vital part, but not a real part of oneself or a spontaneous creation in one's own nature. None of it is yours. The true you is none of this is yours. It's rather the burden that you took on in order to become human enough so you could lift mankind. The sacrifice of the soul, ever striving to lift up mankind through each of us. So it's not necessarily, I don't use dark forces or put too much emphasis on that, but anything that resists, anything that becomes hostile to the spiritual energy, anything that revolts or refuses. Mother Book speaks of this endlessly. is evidence that of our piece, or the part we've taken on of ours, that's part of the collective resistance that doesn't want to change, that doesn't want to evolve. And to call them dark, it's really, you could say, not aligned with the evolutionary purpose, or aligned with the evolutionary purpose, is another way of recognizing it. And we all carry this error to some extent, to varying extent. And we are the ones that are unwittingly sanctioning it, or believing it. This is what he's pointing to. To create a confusion and darkness in the physical mind and to throw into it or awake in it mistaken ideas, dark thoughts, false impressions is a favorite method of these assailants. And if they can get the support of the mind, either from overconfidence or from self-doubt, it is its own correctness or the natural rightness of its impressions and interferes. Then they can have a field day until the true mind reasserts itself and blows the clouds away. Another device of theirs is to awaken some hurt or rankling sense of grievance in the lower vital parts and keep them hurt or rankling as long as possible. Just take a wounding, just take the trauma, just take the story, and just keep trying to keep you in the story, keep trying to keep you in that whole structure of opposing and resisting and denying. In that case, one has to discover these openings in one's nature and learn to close them permanently to such attacks, or to throw out the intruders at once or as soon as possible. We say that when you catch yourself getting overtaken, you withdraw your consent, you step back, or you throw it out in order before it becomes so convincing that you get absorbed into it. So you know it enough to put your toe in and say, oh, there you are, and say, be gone, be gone. And it is the power of saying be gone, even when you're partially in the enthrall of the negative story. Because every time you take an action from that new place rather than that old place, something of the divine truth comes through you and opens up the space amidst that structure, its capacity to hold your consciousness, to grip you. The occurrence is no proof of a fundamental incapacity. It is no proof of a fundamental incapacity. If one takes the right inner attitude, it can and will be overcome. One must have faith in the master of our life and our works, even if for a time he conceals himself, and then, in his or her own right time, he or she will reveal their presence. So you're a battlefield. It's not about you in the way that we're habituated to. It's not about our own enlightenment. It's about being willing to be the divine person and to let the incarnation incarnate as us. So, I just wanted to kind of speak this and maybe give a fresh look at what it is we've talked about in relationship to these world teachings of Shri Aurobindo, which have permeated every field of psychology and sociology. I mean, it's everywhere in our society now. To see that what we're talking about is already here. We're just articulating it newly. And part of it is because I didn't know Shri Aurobindo. I've read this before, 10 years ago. But it's only this time that I'm reading it, when the incarnation is looking to manifest itself more fully in me and those who come to me during this time of transition, that I'm now reading it and recognizing what we're up to. All right, there you have it. So this is my end of year gift opportunity, challenge, adventure, to bring forth that greater capacity that you have, that you don't want to know you have. A greater capacity to go beyond what you don't want or don't know how to go beyond. A greater capacity to be useful, to give yourself over, to be patient with yourself, to endure the process, to keep coming back to your purpose for being here, purpose for being on the planet, your purpose for being with me and this community and this particular work. Wherever you are, it's not necessary to be a devotee of Satri or it's even a student of Satri. There are people who are receiving this force and recognizing it in their own experience that don't need any of that because they're already willing. They're already receptive. They come in the time of the incarnation to be. Come and live as the incarnation. So welcome. You probably didn't even know what you were signing up for, right? Especially those of you who signed up years ago. Well, I didn't know. I didn't know what I signed up for. But it was happening, but I couldn't believe it. I mean, I have my mind always disbelieving and dismissing everything that happens. I have these wonderful events that happen, revelations that happen, and give it a couple of days and my mind is forgetting it or dismissing it or saying, oh, it's just one more of those. But there are always evidences of the truth of it, and the mind will not allow us to see the thread of the transformative forces that are continuously at work. But there's always the evidence of the deepening of your relationship with that static or dynamic principle, that authority, that presence, that strength and capacity to stand in the truth of itself, even amidst the onslaughts. And then the great expanded peace and wholeness and sense of connection, ananda, that comes every time we move a chunk of that which before was running us. So this is not common. This is common to many, many people. I've talked to many, many people. I've listened to many, many recordings. I've heard you talk to each other. And I know that the nature of what we're describing is not unique. You're all carrying a piece of this same opportunity. You're all in the process of incarnating. We called it the Sat force, but now we can call it the incarnation force. It was called the supramental force, or that quality of the incarnation, which is both presence and force. Okay. So anybody want to come forward and share or ask questions or whatever? She's popping over there in the corner anyway.
Oh, this is good.
How's that feeling? How are you?
I'm so amused. I don't think I've been this amused for like months. It was like you were reading my diary. It was like a very succinct synopsis, no detail left out of.
So stop using my mouth, will you?
Yeah, I mean, but it's great. I mean, I feel this sort of like
Yes.
expansion because it's piercing through the doubt, which I'm doing on my own, but when somebody else does it with me, it's like a much larger force at work. And mostly just feeling very grateful that you continue to approach things with, new language and new perceptions, because it seems to really assist and match the freshness of what is happening. And because I am doing this daily, this process is happening, and I am really only just doing it from inside of me, which is still partly conditioned or contaminated, we could say. I'm going to continue to do that, but I also wanted to just ask you if it's apparent that there's anything in one of those parts of the human or personality that's ready for, I don't know, the chopping block. I mean, I'm doing it, but how, it's not so much doubt, it's just the contemplation, like how much can I do and how much am I doing and what am I missing never ceases. So at a certain point, I'd love to just, get a fresh perspective.
I think you're obviously a demonstration that it's already happening. So if it's already happening, then you don't have to come out of the happening of it. You can stay in it happening. Okay. And it'll be just like this. Yeah. It'll come and it'll go, and it'll come and it'll go, until there's no stone unturned. And it is a long process, becoming stable in that. Because you're bringing a youthful enthusiasm. And enthusiasm isn't really going to get you there. A slow, steady perseverance and determination is. But enjoy when it comes. But later, Shri Aurobindo talks about a positive attitude. That truth will always demonstrate in creating a positive attitude, as a recognition of the opportunity of what's arising. The untruth will always create a negative attitude, the resistance, the opposition, the doubt, and the questioning of what's arising. So whenever you catch yourself in your familiar negative story, you're going to at least use the discriminating intellect to say, this is not truth. This is the habit that I've unwittingly made truth. So if you can catch that, then you can do the techniques that we talk about, because once you can catch it, once you can say, once you can call it untruth, once you can say, this is an unwitting truth I keep recreating for myself, my depression, my dissatisfaction, my angst, my resentment, my resistance, once you can name it, you got authority over it to some extent. And then when you have that authority, you can begin to withdraw your consent to be run by it. And this is a laborious process if you're quite vested in your negative story. Who would be vested in a negative story? The one who doesn't want to grow up. The one who doesn't want to be on the planet. The one that doesn't want to risk love. The one who doesn't want to risk. The one who wants to be safe. It's one who wants to keep in control. The one who wants to amass its power, its knowledge base, its construct of things that makes it okay, and so it doesn't have to change. This is the nature of unveiling, finding, and what you need to do that, of course, is quietude. More and more stillness and silence, not just outward, inward. Because the more that inward peace comes, then in the midst of life, you have a perspective other than where the outer frenetic activity would take you. Mm-hmm. So you're right there, and the only thing that is happening right now is your body is taking in a lot more than the rest of you can keep up with. So you don't know what to do with it. And it's not yet stable enough. Your system, your vessel's not stable enough to hold all the energies that are coming to you and all the revelations, because in the past, a little revelation you would have filled up a diary with. Now you're getting revelations all the time. You don't have any time to write it in your diary. So the nature of this is that it is coming into a flow of immediacy where everything is always happening now. And then there's nothing to hang on to, nothing to understand, nothing to convert into something useful or meaningful or fits into the existing old paradigm that helps enhance that old paradigm. That's what mind does. That's why it's the psychic being, which is inherently positive, like in children, in play, in nature. That spontaneous wanting to be in life, to be connected, to play, to participate, that part that gets shut down by the trauma of becoming a human being. But that part gets restored. It comes back. And we start discovering the adventure of being incarnated by the divine person. So that's what's happening.
Okay, so there's no, I don't get to get chopped. I want to get chopped.
No, you're just too willing.
So would you recommend like yoga, like a physical practice, or like what can I do to help?
Well, there's a lot of things. I
You're
think,
coming to India.
yeah, we've
That would
already
be
set
enough
you
right
on
there.
track. And you know yoga, right? You've had yoga practice.
I mean,
Maggie, you gotta.
yes.
Yeah. So all you need to do is create a regular yoga practice 2 or 3 times a week,
Okay.
and spend a half an hour or an hour stretching and being in touch with your body. And because what happens there, if you set a time frame and you do yoga for 45 minutes, you don't do anything else but yoga, then you move into presence with your body,
Right.
and that grounds you.
Okay.
Yeah. So yoga's always handy. It's always handy because it grounds you into yourself.
Okay.
And then when the energy is too much, go run up a couple of mountains until it burns off.
Okay.
And
Boring.
there's other tricks which I will share with you as time goes on. Yes, there we go. Yeah, notice the energy. Woo!
That's not true. You gotta watch your time.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm recognizing that there's still a part of myself that is looking to you
To do it for you.
to be my daddy,
Ah, good.
to be my,
Yeah. Just follow me. Everything will be happy.
no, just trying to get some response from you. I'm
Some
recognizing
attention.
that, some
Attention.
attention, yeah. And I'm acknowledging that.
Good.
Good. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, what we do, and you're aware of this part of you
absolutely.
that is still needing that validation or confirmation.
Yes, so I'm putting it out right now.
So when I was looking you over there in that seat, what was going on for you?
Well, you were answering my questions, first
Okay.
of all,
Okay.
and I was attempting to take it in, but I was feeling a lot of different emotions.
Was that with you today or just right then in the chair?
Just now, I mean, you're leaving, and
Ah,
I haven't had any special time with you, and so this is,
Yeah.
this is certain things that are coming up on me, for me, but it also simultaneous to that is, this experience with existence. And I'm looking at the dynamics of things and the discrepancy between what's there, what's actually happening, what my expectation is, what's actually happening.
separating the two.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I look at the discrepancy and say, this is what existence is presenting me right now. And this is my relationship. My relationship is is beyond this physical form. And that's just the question. Is this what I need to be? Is this what I need to be connecting more to? Is this what I need to be? Is this my guru?
You know, it's interesting because you bring this up, because Shri Aurobindo addresses the role of the form in these little pieces. Let me see if I can find the part just to...
This has happened. This is repetition. This
Yeah.
has happened
The battle?
in other events in my past as well.
So, the realization of the Supreme, the Ishvara, is certainly the essential thing, but to approach him with love and devotion and bhakti, to serve him with one's works, and to know him not necessarily by intellectual cognition, but in spiritual experience, is also essential in this path of integral yoga. So it's a paradox. It's both a form and a person. It's a force, a form and a force. It is a force and it is a person. Because it's the person of the incarnation that's seeking to establish itself. And there is a paradox in this, because this happens. This happens to a number of people, where they actually experience, they think it's me, entering into their body as them. I had it happen for me with my teacher in about the 3rd or 4th year, where literally Shri Aurobindo came into my body and inhabited my body. And it was extraordinary because I was experiencing in my whole body the person of the incarnation. So what that did is it made it real in an unforgettable experience. And of course, it happened because the person of the incarnation had already taken over. And the person of the incarnation will always use your person. Your thoughts, your memories, your patterns, your habits, your nature. And there will be this brief meeting of an alien divine person in your personal person. And in that moment, in that paradox, you know the divine as a form and a force. But it's not unique to this form. It's your form. And there's a point when the vital, the mental, and the physical, and the psychic open. The psychic often opens first. And it opens so that it becomes inhabited. So, you live for him, you live with him, and you live as him. That is the path. You serve, you work for, you serve the mission, you serve the form of the teacher. Because Shri Aurobindo had to be in a form. Mother had to be in a form for the incarnation to work. It's not an abstraction. It's not the field of Brahman, the all-pervading Brahmanic field. It is a personal expression, made individual in our own experience. So, has that happened yet, or will it happen? He's assuring you, once you quit listening to your negative story, it will happen. Once you quit stepping back from the forces that you've unwittingly consented to take you down the rabbit hole or distract you or put you into a position of resistance or rebellion, that's what happens. How long does that take?
So how do I connect with the form?
Yeah.
How do I relate to the form? Because I have a sense of what's beyond the form.
Good. You got that.
Yeah.
So the form itself.
The form is the one I have the problem with.
That's right. And that is where I had the problem with. I had the problem with the form of my teacher. His personality, his way of doing things, his ways of thinking, his randomness, and his preference for chaos and getting anything done, and so on and so forth. So I had to learn to include. And it wasn't until there was enough including of the person being that way that it could happen, that it did happen. It only happened a couple of times, but that's all. Then from there on, it took over from there. So, and the people who have had this happen to, I know it's a sanction. I know the Incarnation has chosen them. And it's just a matter of time for them to get it. But how did they get it? By continuing to work for divine, with divine, as divine. Because there are three modalities of the same relationship, the same principle. Who is it that's working for divine? It's as divine. Who's working with divine? It's as divine. It is that which has always been living us. Only now, in this arena that we have created, co-created, this thing is a vibrant possibility. It is a tangible energetic field that we can, even the most resistant, obscured, rebellious part of us can fucking recognize.
So speak to me like I'm a child. How do I relate to you?
All right, good. So the simplest way is to find ways to be of service, or ask, how can I be of service? And then follow the instructions.
That's what I've been in this kind of space where I'm not being given any instructions.
Okay, well,
You know?
I think
So-
we talked about fixing that for you.
We spoke about that. But,
Got to go through the machinery.
yeah, it's got to go through the machinery.
And meanwhile, all you have to do is serve divine in any aspect that arises,
Yes.
and that everything you do thereby is for divine.
Yeah.
And then stay in connection to that divinity that you already are, in constant contemplation, and in time, the specifics of what may be needed for you will show up. You know, it hasn't been that long. You've pretty much been cleaning up the karma, emptying out,
Yes.
the basket.
Yes.
And now you've kind of mastered. You're in a state of certain degree of mastery with yourself and your life. And it's going to come,
Okay.
whatever that may show up.
All right.
But the part of you that defines herself by what she does may not be
Right.
the way it has to show up.
Exactly. I understand that. I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So coming to, I've said before, holding space for groups, being in a relationship where you're holding the space for the meditation or holding the space for an inquiry or these, will expand your ability to know this truth that you are. As it will for all of you at some point.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And I believe also that my appreciation and love for you, as far as what you bring, will shine forth.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Very
I know
good.
that.
All right, thank you. Namaste.
Okay, Erica, thank you. Satri, you have to wrap it up. Time to
Isn't that interesting? It all comes down to love.
always.
It always comes down to love. Love without an agenda. Love without needing a certain outcome. Love itself is fulfilled. You don't need. Ananda is the fulfillment. So it all stops. It's fulfilled with itself. That's what Ananda is, fulfilled with itself. In all of itself. And it's that self, and the individual self, and yourself, and that self. So it's in the bhakti that he's pointing to, that the integration into the person of you, with all its needs and wants, and all its denials, and its woundings, that's where it gets resolved. With the very weave of you as a child, as a adolescent, and all the stages of your life where you move into relationship with the fullness of what it means to be a human divine being, a human person who's also a divine person. And that's just the work. If it's the rest of your life, so what? What better way can you live? Whatever form that may take, outwardly. Service, constant remembrance, surrender, devotion. There you go. Okay, so let's have a silent sitting as we end up our last satsang for 2019.
No, you'll be doing some in India.
Yeah, but 2019, I mean.
2019, you'll be doing some in India.
I will, oh, really? Yes, that's right. We will be doing the introduction to the Indian program on the 29th of December. You are really a stickler for details.
So precise.
You can be. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so just let's do 10 minutes. So we can be with each other in this way. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri. May truth manifest. Namaste. I couldn't get the word out. Too big for the throat. Okay, until we meet again.